Were you
A work of original fiction. All characters, names, and events depicted below are entirely invented and do not represent, describe, or refer to any real person, living or dead, or any real royal family, nation, or historical event. Any resemblance is coincidental. The marriage between Princess Alara and Prince Adrian of Sorrenthal did not end in a single loud moment. It ended the way most quiet tragedies do, slowly, in the small silences that no one outside the palace walls ever saw. When they were first married, the halls of Castellane Palace had rung with laughter. Alara used to tease Adrian about his terrible piano playing. He used to sneak into the kitchens with her at midnight to steal pastries meant for state dinners. But somewhere in the years that followed, the laughter thinned into something careful, something rehearsed. Dinners that once ran long with conversation became short and formal. Alara would watch her husband across the table and feel, more and more, like a guest in her own home. She could not point to the exact day it changed. There was no single betrayal she could name, no one argument she could blame. It was smaller than that, a look that lingered too long on someone else, a phone call taken behind a closed door, a warmth in his voice that no longer reached her. Celine Duval had been a family friend for years, a woman Adrian had loved once, long before Alara, and who had never quite left the edges of his life. Alara didn't need proof to know that Celine's presence had grown heavier with time. She felt it in the space between her and her husband, a distance that widened even when they stood in the same room. She tried, at first, to close that distance. She planned trips for just the two of them. She learned to speak more plainly about what she needed, but nothing seemed to reach him anymore. The palace, for all its gold and marble, began to feel like a beautiful cage. She was not just losing a husband. She was losing the one place she had believed she belonged. What hurt most wasn't a single cruel word. It was the quiet erosion of her place in her own life. Decisions made without her, plans built around her absence, as though she had already been replaced, and no one had bothered to tell her. She began to withdraw, not out of anger, but because she had nothing left to fight with. In that withdrawal, something in her shifted. She stopped hoping the marriage would heal and started longing, quietly, for something that belonged only to her, something no one could take away. She didn't know yet where she would find it. She only knew that she was tired of surviving on scraps of a life that no longer felt like hers. It was in that quiet hunger for something real that Alara met Damien Cole. He was not a nobleman, not a diplomat, not anyone the court would have chosen for her. He was a riding instructor hired for her younger son's lessons, a man with an easy laugh and a habit of actually listening when she spoke. With Damien, Alara did not feel like a title. She felt, for the first time in years, like a person. Their relationship grew slowly and carefully, in stolen afternoons and quiet corners of the countryside estate. Every meeting carried risk, and every risk made the connection feel more vivid. Around Damien, Alara could breathe. She smiled without forcing it. For a little while, the weight she carried everywhere else seemed almost bearable. But secrecy is a strange kind of shelter. It protects a thing, and at the same time it slowly starves it. Alara and Damien could never be seen together, never build a life in the open. Their worlds were too far apart, and no amount of affection could close that gap. As the months went on, the pressure of hiding began to wear on what had once felt like freedom. The relationship did not end in a dramatic fight. It simply grew quieter, the pauses between them growing longer, until one day they both understood, without needing to say it, that it was over. Alara was left with the strange ache of having found something real and having to let it go anyway, like so much else in her life. But something about that chapter never felt fully closed. There were unanswered questions, private moments that had never been explained to anyone, feelings that lingered long after the relationship ended. She tucked those pieces away, unnoticed by the world, and moved forward. She did not know that, years later, those quiet questions would rise again, and this time they would not stay buried. After Damien, Alara's life took a sharper, faster turn. When she met Marcus Reyes, a shipping magnate's son with a reputation for living loudly and without apology, everything moved at a different speed. There was no slow build this time, no careful waiting. Their connection was immediate, bold, urgent, and impossible to hide even if they had tried. For Alara, Marcus represented an escape from the calm, controlled life she had known for so long. Being near him felt unpredictable in a way that thrilled her. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't safe, but it was alive, and after years of feeling invisible, that was enough. Behind closed doors, there were private conversations no one else heard, and small shifts in Alara's behavior that people close to her noticed, but couldn't quite explain. She seemed lighter at times, more unguarded, and at other times, thoughtful in a way that suggested she was carrying something she hadn't shared. Whispers began moving through the circles that paid attention to such things. Rumors of closeness, of plans, of a future no one had confirmed and no one had denied. Then came the night that changed everything. The car Marcus was driving lost control on a coastal road outside the capital, and within moments, the accident that followed pulled 2 lives to an abrupt and devastating end. The details of that night remained frustratingly unclear for years afterward. Enough uncertainty that in the vacuum left behind, rumors began to take root. One of those rumors was quieter than the rest at first, but it would not fade. The idea that there was more to Alara's final months than anyone outside her closest circle had known. Years passed. Time did what it often does. It softened what had once seemed impossible to accept. The relationship between Adrian and Celine, long lived in shadows, was finally brought into the light. Celine took her place beside him not as a rumor, but as his wife, recognized formally by the court and eventually by much of the public. For a while, it seemed the past had been settled, folded neatly away to make room for a new chapter. But old memories rarely disappear just because a new story has begun. Alara's presence, her unanswered questions, the pieces of her life that had never been fully explained, lingered like an echo that refused to fade. Slowly, the old rumors began to circulate again, gathering new details as they moved from voice to voice. Chief among them was the resurfaced theory that Alara had been pregnant in the final months of her life, and more shockingly, that the child might have been born and quietly kept from public knowledge. Names from her past were pulled back into the light. Damien Cole's brief, hidden relationship with Alara became a subject of renewed fascination, examined and re-examined by people looking for anything that might confirm a theory. What had once been a closed chapter was reopened piece by piece, until the rumor stopped being a question and became, in the minds of many, something that demanded an answer. Then came the claim that changed everything, not simply that a child might exist, but that the child had already come forward. The rumor split into 2 competing theories, each pulling the story in a different direction. Some pointed to Alara's younger son, Theo, noting small physical traits they believed hinted at Damien Cole rather than Adrian. Others dismissed that theory as too simple and proposed something darker, that Alara might have had an entirely separate child, one who had never been part of the public record at all. The second theory did not stay a quiet whisper for long. It gained momentum as people searched for gaps in the known history, small inconsistencies that could be reinterpreted as evidence of something hidden. And then, just as the speculation reached its peak, a young man named Julian Ashby stepped forward. Julian did not present himself with hesitation. He spoke with conviction, claiming to be the son Alara had never been allowed to acknowledge. His story was detailed. A childhood shaped by unexplained absences, a slow discovery of fragments of his own identity, a life lived at a careful distance from a truth he said had been kept from him deliberately. He spoke of abandonment and secrecy with a steadiness that made people pause, not just because of what he said, but because of how convincingly he said it. The public was divided. Some were captivated, certain they were witnessing a missing piece of history finally falling into place. Others were skeptical, unable to believe a secret of that size could have stayed buried for so long. The calm within Castellane Palace did not last. Celine began a quiet, methodical investigation, reopening old records, revisiting details long set aside, tracing every connection that might confirm or dismiss Julian's claim. Nothing was left unexamined. As her search deepened, so did her public statements. She began suggesting carefully but pointedly that there was more to Alara's story than history had recorded, that the truth might not be as simple as everyone had believed. The claims spread quickly, and they did not go unanswered. Rowan, Alara's elder son, confronted Celine directly. For him, this was not an abstract question of historical curiosity. It was about protecting his mother's memory from being rewritten by speculation and ambition. He asked Celine firmly to stop before the situation went further than either of them could control. Celine listened, but she did not relent. What had begun as curiosity had become, for her, something closer to a mission. Determined to settle the matter, Celine arranged for a private DNA test involving Julian Ashby, handled discreetly to avoid public scrutiny before any result was confirmed. But her ambitions did not stop there. Quietly, without informing anyone beyond her closest advisors, she arranged a second test, this one involving Theo, the son whose parentage had also been quietly questioned for years. If the results confirmed her suspicions, it would not just settle a rumor. It would rewrite the family's entire history. As both tests moved forward, the tension inside the palace grew heavier by the day. Every step Celine took brought her closer to an answer, and closer to consequences she could not fully predict. Celine waited with an outward calm that masked the storm underneath. Every decision she had made, every line she had crossed to get here, led to this moment. She believed, with quiet certainty, that at least one result would vindicate her, that the truth would finally align with everything she had suspected. The first result arrived without warning. It concerned Julian Ashby, and it was unambiguous. He was not related to Alara or to Damien Cole at all. His carefully told story, however convincing, could not survive the evidence. The claim that had captivated so much public attention collapsed instantly, leaving behind a silence heavier than the noise that had preceded it. Celine held onto hope for the second result, believing the questions surrounding Theo would finally give her the confirmation she had been chasing. When it arrived, it did not go the way she expected. The test confirmed, without any doubt, that Theo was Adrian's biological son. In that single moment, every theory Celine had built, every risk she had taken, every line she had crossed collapsed under the weight of the truth. She had pushed forward with such certainty that she had never truly prepared herself for the possibility of being wrong. Now there was no way to undo what she had already set in motion. The investigation, the public claims, the confrontation with Rowan, the quiet damage to a family already fragile with grief. The realization did not arrive loudly. It settled over her slowly, like a weight she could not shift. There was nothing left to search for, no answer left to chase. The mission that had consumed her had reached its end, but not the end she had wanted. And in that overwhelming moment, something in her gave way. It was not simply physical exhaustion. It was the collapse of everything she had believed, everything she had built her certainty upon, crumbling all at once. What remained in the silence that followed was the full weight of what she had done, and the truth that, in trying to rewrite history, she had only revealed how far she was willing to go to control it. This story and all characters within it, Alara, Adrian, Celine, Damien Cole, Marcus Reyes, Rowan, Theo, Julian Ashby, and the Kingdom of Sorrenthal, are entirely fictional creations, written for dramatic and narrative purposes only.